Welcome. I'm Dr. Michael Sameka. Today I have the wonderful distinction to talk to Mr. Jeff Bloch, and I will let Jeff introduce himself and let you know a little bit about him. We're doing a bit of a dry run here. This is going to be like a little bit of a discovery on first technologically wise for Jeff to get up to snuff and to learn what he can or can't do, what he has to learn, what he has to improve because he's bettering himself. And then for me, just to get pure content, I can't wait to see what comes out of his mouth because it's always exciting. So welcome, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. What are we even talking about, right? What are we trying to accomplish here? One is to become a master of your situation, right? Of your, master of your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, and have peace, in your emotions, feelings, and thoughts. And I think what you and I explore all the time is that, there's kind of this inner knowing that we all have, and when we're almost quiet in our, when our mind's quiet and we're in the presence of a conversation or an event or whatever, if we're just super present, right, completely mindful, then we naturally have the right answers, the right actions, the right way to react.
The word right is a little confusing because if you weren't present, you would get the right actions of not being present, which again, dry mouth water. So the feedback you're going to get is always right. Now we have to define optimal. What is optimal? Which I think that's what you're meaning when you said right. Because if you were to put your hand on a stove, you would get the right feedback. It wouldn't be feel good. You wouldn't enjoy it. It wouldn't be in alignment with what your goals and intentions are. But the integrity of the feedback is always pristine. And so if you're not present, you're going to get the right feedback, but you're actually not talking about the word right because it's always correct. It can never be incorrect. But if you're talking about now functioning optimally or with great awareness, because awareness, like anything else, is there's no ceiling, it's infinite. So you can always have greater awareness. Now, maybe your awareness can only be so great right now in this moment, but you still want to have optimal awareness, whatever that is. And if you work on that, then you can have more optimal awareness down the road. So I just wanted to really stop that whole thing about right.
Yes, so
Right in its tracks.
that is a great distinction, because right, we label, obviously if you label something right, then there must be a wrong, and
Correct.
optimal is so much better. And then also, I like what you're touching on is that the universe is giving us feedback all the time, and the feedback is perfect based on the conditions
Perfect.
that cause the feedback. And yet we say, why is this happening to me, or why is there these issues in the world? And it all of a sudden that becomes the focus of what's broken and wrong, and how is it's not fair, and what do I, why me, right?
Well,
And what
that's
is
it.
that?
You're going through the lens of brokenness. See, the assumption is that something's broken. And what's broken, if you really want to play around in the paradox of this, is the assumption. It's not a great idea to go, what's wrong with me? Or why is this happening to me? And that's why we say, no, it's happening for you. It's feedback. It's integrous. It's perfect. It's right on time. And if you have that quote unquote mindset, you're golden. But when you go as far as functioning optimally, but when you start to play as if a version of you will play as if, oh, Houston, we have a problem here. Just seeing through that lens is going to mess you up when if your intention is to function optimally. If that is your intention to be at your best, the feedback you're getting is always going to be amazing, whether it's pain or bliss. It's going to be right on time. It's going to be perfect. And not all pain that we experience is because of something we're doing. It could be just something that's going on in our body. It could be metabolic, for instance, something organic. But it's really important to go, oh, I got a pain. We got a problem here. And it's like, well, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad. That's a hell of a leap. I don't think you want to go with, if it's uncomfortable, it's bad. I think you're allowed to go, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And I would go, oh, you mean you want peace? I wouldn't want to focus on the uncomfortability. I would want to focus on peace, or, I would like to have space or things of that nature. So I'm going off, but tell me a little bit about you for the audience. So who are you and what's your connection with me and all that?
Sure. So, let's see. I'm, Jeff Bloch, living in Florida right now. Been here 10 years. And I think what what I really wanted to touch on today is that for the past 35 years, I've been in corporate America, and I've been doing, the traditional American dream of climbing the corporate ladder, trying to, establish myself in a career and then move on. And what I've noticed is that there was a lot of disappointments in that and a lot of inner challenges, right? Because there's, when I look at a lot of the ills in society, many of them, it feels, as I've come to understand, are driven by this need for consumerism, the need for more, the need for taking the mountain, perhaps, as opposed to doing a blend of staying very connected with your own inner voice. And so I think when you and I have been working together over, not over a decade, I think now, a lot of that, when you talk about greaterness and optimization, those are the things that, I've been focusing on in my private life almost outside of corporate America. And, corporate, you play this game, and you're trying to, advance and advance and advance. And what I came to realize is that just wasn't feeling right. So I did the great resignation, is what's happening in the country. Is I left in December, left my job, and am now creating the next chapter.
What does the role that video plays in this, and how am I helping you now by doing this dry run? And what's in your future that you're getting involved, this level of technology and whatnot?
Well, on some level, I want to say I have no idea, because I'm just starting that new
Good.
chapter. Right. I've the one term I've been hanging on to is this soulful tendencies. And what that means for me is, we all have that component of us, but how much time do we give it? And is it really just a tendency, or does it become a huge part of our life? So it's a little bit of play on words. But for me, it's kind of this next chapter is I want to make sure that I'm spending a lot more time in that. And what that ultimately means, I'm trying to find ways to share that with people. Right now, I think a lot of people have been doing that all internally. It doesn't really, what is it? It doesn't translate into corporate America easily. It doesn't translate often with our friends, because they have opinions of who we are. We have opinions of who they are, and we kind of interact in a way like that. And so it's so dynamic of a challenge, but that's what I want to stay focused on. And, trying to, with podcasts or with videos, just trying to find a way to have a voice and figure out what, and part of that, as is you discover yourself, right? As you get out there and express it, as opposed to being in your own monkey mind, which can be good or bad, and it's hard to give it direction.
Right. Well, I can't imagine that the monkey mind is definitely what you want to be in as far as a default. I would definitely go back to is probably suboptimal, and I think that when you know that there's more and that you need more and that there is this longing for more, or if you will, or you're being nudged internally, you could feel it. It's like being pushed a little bit. I think that you have to respect that and honor that and follow that and trace that. And you mentioned something about it not engaging the corporate world, when you do these things. And my whole sense is well, if you find a need, it'll engage. I mean, if you really meet a need, it'll work. And if you're not meeting a need, then it won't. And it's so you have to decide, do you really want to meet the needs of corporate America? Because if you did, you would do it very well. And you have. Now, I'm not saying moving into your future, you won't be able to create something that will meet the needs of corporate, right? Where you can get those doors to open up. But I'm so curious about outside of those parameters, if you didn't use those parameters and you just kind of really did this deep dive into emerging Jeff, what would you be doing? Now that excites me. I think that's the greatest adventure on the planet. And do you want to give us a little hint, since you're Jeff, you might have an inside track. There may be some intimate cues you're getting on what that is.
There's a ton of stuff I would love to, dive into. It's all the stuff
Cool.
that we often
Well,
talk about.
I'll hit that. So this way you can only talk about things that you really are interested in. And that's key. All right. If it interests you, it's going to interest the viewer.
For the audience that doesn't know me, I'm someone that for 35 years has climbed the corporate ladder, became an executive for the last 15 years in high tech, and had during that time had some real mixed emotions, because I I was, I was trying to live the American dream and really was, from all outside perspectives, probably grabbing that. But then there was always this internal angst, perhaps, and in particular about how to position, how to think about all the ills in society and all the ills within my own head, the monkey mind that as we often talk about and things like that. And so, then that's really led for, wow, for a decade or two or more, a real quest to understand that. And so it's becoming, my complete focus now is mastering of my emotions and understanding that, so that, as you talk about, to be greater, to have a greaterness or an optimization of who I'm being in the world. That's what I'm focused on. And so that's what I'm diving into.
Well, I love having you because your energy is infectious. I think that that's what I love about our dynamic, because I do this all week long, right? And with so many different people. And you're charged it with this enthusiasm, right? You've got all this incredible energy behind your conversation with me, because you are, what I really believe, a seeker in the truest form of the word. Like, you embody seeking and you do it with passion. And so I wanted people to see you and share it with you. So I have a two-part question just to move this along. First part, in your, I don't know, experience of working with me, how would you even describe Greaterness coaching? And it's fine. You don't worry, chill out. You could just do however do, or as poorly as you, just your best. And then what do you get from it? Like, what is the benefit? I mean, because I really want people who are clueless about these concepts and ideas to get an understanding of its utility, if it has any benefit at all. And do you want to hit that?
Absolutely. So that's a great question, because these days, and even back for decades, people can access all kinds of learnings through gurus, right? I have a list of gurus that I've watched endless YouTube videos and read books, and we have all done that on some level as we've kind of tried to grapple with this inner peace or mastery of being a human being. And the things that I think you and I cover on the phone, what you call greaterness coaching is one phrase for that, is really a little bit more personalized, right? So the things that I've been studying and reading, it helps me apply it to my daily life, because there is this transition of how do you, okay, great, you have these great concepts, and sometimes when I read and listen to these videos, I'm all jazzed, but then how do you integrate that into your daily living? And that's, I think, where you and I hit on, because I have obviously roadblocks like everyone, and stuff that comes up in life that I have to wrestle with, why is that person acting that way? Or how do I treat them? Did I react the right way? This is a complex situation I'm dealing with. How do I do it from a greaterness or an optimal perspective? And so I think those are the things that I really get out of our sessions when we talk.
Okay, cool. What about the second part of that? Is there any sound bites or concepts that stick with you the most that you'd like to share with people? And like when I remember this, it really helps. And when I dust this off, it really helps. And this one, I'm not allowed to forget. Are there any concepts or ideas or thoughts that really support you throughout the day?
Yeah, I mean, there's endless amounts, right? Like, I have pages and pages and pages of notes from our discussions alone that I refer back to. I love, for example, the one thing that I've talked to you about frequently that I use all the time is the succession 7. So that's like, if I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm having, crappy thoughts about I got something I have to deal with, or something's worrying me, I use that as like a meditation almost to release that. And it only
Beautiful.
takes 2 minutes now, right? I'm well practiced in it after a decade of using it.
Cool.
Yeah. And we could talk about that if you want now, or
Well,
of
I'm just curious
what's
what juices you. I really
okay,
don't
good.
care, because if it juices you, it juices me. And if I'm guessing that anybody who's eavesdropping, people who are watching this, it's going to juice them. So where's your juice now? What do you want to bring into this conversation?
The thing that, I hit on this morning when in my thoughts was just this notion that, we all we all realistically, when we're in our hearts of hearts, we kind of want to become an instrument in the world of, peace and joy, for example, is a way to say that.
Mhm.
We're all wanting to do well, not only for ourselves, but for others, our loved ones, as well as humanity and the environment. And, I think almost everyone has a lot of that deep seated in them. It's kind of that that awareness and consciousness internally. And so and this is what I really love about the work that we do together is it takes that as kind of a very fluffy concept and shows you how to apply it in daily life. And so for me, one thing that I've kind of held on to recently is this notion that to have this overarching intention that you can, whenever you're wondering, why am all of a sudden I'm feeling anxiety? What's going on? And you often call that, what is it?
Convoluted energy.
Convoluted. Okay, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, having a ground point, and that's something that's worked for me. And often it's through some of the phrases that I've learned from you and others to say, okay, here's something that'll take me back to that optimal way of trying to communicate and be that I want to live in more and more of my day.
That's beautiful. So anything else that you want to unpack? Because I think that I can talk and talk. I'm trying to optimize your being here.
Well, you and I had touched on a little bit in a previous conversation. And it's this notion of, I brought up the word right. And you said, rights. I don't know if that's the right word. Optimize, optimal.
Yeah.
And so
that's
hitting
beautiful.
on that a little more, because we go through our whole life, and it gets, one word is judgment, right? We start to quickly judge a situation. And, instead of being right, being kind, as I always go back to that and try and go back to that. But
Nice.
how does that play in? And when you talk about, when you think of yourself,
I guess
optimizing.
I guess we are going into the succession 7, because there's no other way to really answer this than through that system, at least to do it completely. These are values choices. And when you start to recognize that when you embrace things well, i.e. unconditional welcoming, and you allow for whatever to be, so that you're not putting yourself behind the 8 ball by saying something like, oh, Houston, we have a problem here. Because once you say that, you actually compromise your functionality, because you're seeing it through stressed eyes and you're seeing it through problematic vision, because you're saying it's a problem, rather than we say there's no problems, only calls to answer. But with the succession 7, the idea is you start out with mindfulness. And mindfulness for me, when I'm really being mindful, like I'll show you right now, it's like, I have got to slow down. So when I slow down, I'm definitely functioning better, right? Because there's not the same freneticism that's dominating my presentation, right? My experience and expression. So I slow down. And part of slowing down just organically puts me into ease, right? Let it be easy. And we say let it be easy because if you're letting it be easy, you're giving yourself a shot at being more optimal rather than suboptimal. And now here's the big one. It's coming. You have to effortlessly, with ease, that's what effortlessly is, sanctify anything that's coming. And the sanctification starts with unconditional welcoming. And most people think like, oh, I'm not going to do that. What happened to me was horrible. I'm not going to unconditionally welcome that. I'm not going to let this person who violated me get away with it and say, I needed that, or it was meant to happen, or that he was a vehicle of life's intelligence. I can't do that. And that's great. I'm cool with that. I'm like, wow, then sanctify the fact that you can't do that, right? So it's about each person's process, because you can't skip a step. So when you try to skip a step, you end up not making any progress at all, because you have to go back to the step that you skipped. And then everything after that is sequential. So the succession 7 doesn't say just sanctify, because that's really important. But it says what? What's the priority comes before it? Ease. Let it be easy. That's where the breath comes in. That's where mindfulness. Now, when I started with mindfulness, what did that tell me? Wow, I got to slow down. And we even have a point before mindfulness, and that's stopping. We call that the 0 point, where you just stop. Because if you're stopping, you can reset everything. And so we start with stopping, and then that slows you down, right? And then you start with mindfulness, letting it be easy. then sanctifying anything that comes your way. And the part of sanctification is recognizing that it has a purpose, a reason for being, that if it's happening for you. And so if you're really participating in sanctification, what's going to happen is you're going to be grateful because you're really buying into the reality that this is actually intelligent. It's actually happening for you. So you don't have to synthetically be grateful for it because you're doing it sequentially in this way and you're sanctifying really well. What happens? Organically, you're grateful. And then when you're grateful, what happens after that? Organically, you're happy, meaning content, meaning there's a fulfilledness, right? You're okay. All is well, right? And then what happens when you're happy? You're kind to others. That's when you start serving other people. And if you're in a place where you're fulfilled and all is well, heck, it's almost like your spiritual duty to support people who aren't there. And so that's why I share the Succession 7. And ultimately, that service, that kindness that comes after happiness, that brings us to the newness and the creativity of what can I do that would really be kind, serving others. That's what service is. It's an act of kindness, whereas I can really help another individual elevate his or her life. And right. And so you see the whole system. So where you came in about something being wrong, I could sanctify that that's how you see it, but I would still, as ease-filled as I possibly can, offer a cookie to say, well, the feedback, Jeff, is integrous, right? It's perfect. All feedback is perfect given the sets of circumstances that preceded it. And when you realize that and you concede to that, which means you let that in, wow, we call that a mindset. And now you got the right, correct, more optimal mindset. And what happens when you have the right mindset? You start discovering things. So we say, with the right mindset, wow, you start to see things and get clear about things. But if you're having an adversarial relationship to something like, Houston, we got a problem here, let's do battle, that's not going to give you the same result. And even if you did get a result, think about the cost and the quality of your life that you're spending your life doing battle. So did that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And I recognize each step. There's actually 7 distinct steps that you just went through. So fantastic. And I definitely use those all the time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we're going to just leave it at this unless there's some other burning desire that you have, because I like to keep things short and sweet. And I may let this end up being more about like successions as an aspect of greaterness coaching than greaterness coaching itself, because I really want to do a standalone, Thriveapeutic documentary and series or show or episode just on the Succession 7. And this will probably be part of that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. And I think what we're talking about here and what you're doing is, if you can, chunk these building blocks for people, because that's ultimately, I think, where I've gotten tripped up many times is, and we haven't even touched on different personas or archetypes and those things, but that's where those really come into play, where all of a sudden you're seeing things in a completely different lens. And some of these building blocks are ways to get back to, that state that you're talking about.
Oh, I love that. Jeff, I love that, because we do see organically, and which means we see through the eyes that dominate our being, that brain state, that persona. And boy, the amount of blind spots that we have by being true to that one part of ourselves. And we think when we're being true to ourselves, that we're being true to the totality of ourselves. And we're only being true to that version or that season of us. It's not the totality of us. And so if you could see with other eyes, you start to shed light on what was previously a blind spot. And that's where it's like, that's where, working with this kind of work is so beneficial and helpful, and why people like yourself keep coming back for years. When did we start? Because this is bragging rights for me right now. No, really, when did we start?
I don't know exactly, but it's probably been 17 years or so.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's in that time frame. Yeah.
And did we ever waste a session as if that were possible? Was that ever a time where you and I was like, well, that was a session I really didn't need to do, you know?
Well, no, but uh, what I have to say here is there's been multiple times I'm like, well, I don't know. I think I'm going to stop for a while because, this maybe isn't there. And then it's that session that blows it up like, oh my God, that's great.
Wow, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that just shows you if you share that, it's like anything else. If you're in the service industry, if people can give you a hint about what's going on for them, like really like why you might be losing me as a client, you give them an opportunity to knock it out of the park. And if they don't knock it out of the park, that's because they're in their recursion, right? They're in their loop. They're just running on automatic pilot and they're just like throwing spaghetti in the wall and seeing what sticks. Well, I ain't sticking. Sayonara, sucker. But if you could be really present, right? And you think about how much we learn by being with each other in this field of pure openness, like pure unconditional welcoming and pure discovery. I mean, how amazingly exciting is our time together because of that alone, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you for this time. I appreciate you. And I guess we'll speak again on Wednesday. Is that what we're talking now? I forget. On Monday.
Yes.
Monday.
Is it Mondays?
We're doing Mondays now. It
Yeah.
used to be Wednesday. So we're doing
Right.
Mondays. Well, thank you for your time and supporting this. I really, really appreciate it. I hope we get to do more of this and we can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. How's that?
Sounds great.
All right. You take care.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.